Oh, thank Christ. What a pain in the ass. Got a long way to crawl, baby. High five. Oh shit. Now you fight the mountain.
And so Harkin defied a god. He cast the rune aside and struck Antanas down using only his sword. And in the end, he cast that rune aside, restoring the forces of the world back into balance.
Didn't you just say that?
Harkin found the balance even between the power of his sword and magic, using both means to defeat all manner of Rogar lords and man-made creatures. Despite the markings on his face, he proved himself to be a compassionate man who showed mercy to the just and unjust alike. Once he realized there was incredible knowledge gathered in the planetarium, Harkin became eager to learn the secrets of this world. He chose to turn a blind eye to Antanas' dark experiments. Thanks to Harkin, Yetka was able to reunite with her family. The crafter's crystal was returned to him. He went back to his dimension travels and studying the runes. Harkin sealed the fate of both realms for many years to come. Historians of the future will forever wonder what the world could have been if Harkin's choices had been different.
All right. Well, that was Lords of the Fallen. So, this is where I typically just talk about my overall thoughts in the game, a little mini review. I plan to do a full review, but I keep saying that and then not doing it. We'll see. Anyway, overall, I really enjoyed it. The difficulty, one of my biggest complaints, other than bugs, which, God, we need to talk about that. But one of my biggest complaints is the difficulty curve is all over the place. So at the beginning, it's pretty tough. Like, you're fighting these enemies and, you know, you're doing very little damage and, you know, you don't have that many. Well, you got a decent amount of potions, but you don't have very good gear. Your stats are crap, but the enemies are still pretty rough. And then, like, middle of the game, it feels like easy mode. Like, you're, especially with some of the spells that are obviously overpowered as hell. Like stab is ridiculous. And, like, that spell is just ridiculously good. But, yeah, and, like, you start getting better weapons, and now you just start cutting through enemies like they're nothing. So then all of a sudden the game gets way easy. And then near the end, where you start fighting human enemies that are suddenly way more powerful than the Rogar, which makes absolutely no sense. Then it all of a sudden starts to get tough again because you're and the thing is, it's not even a gradual thing. Like, and I think that's part of the problem is a lot of the enemies you're fighting are enemies you fought from the very beginning of the game or very early on, and then through the rest of the game you're fighting the exact same enemies very frequently. So as you upgrade, you just start mowing through them where they used to give you a lot of trouble. And even into the end game, you're still fighting the same enemies. And then all of a sudden, here come these humans, which are, like, literally some of the base humans you're fighting are tougher than the first boss. That's ridiculous. Like, that is, you're supposed to be making these Rogar out to be this horrible threat. But yet you bowl, like, any of these guys could have bowled over a lot of these Rogars, and again, including the first boss, without much problems. So it's like, what? Like, this doesn't even make sense. It's like they kind of realize, oh, we're at the end of the game. We need to start making this difficult. It's too easy. I feel like the enemies probably were more normal beginning, but then they felt, oh, we feel like the end game's too easy. Let's jack up their hit points and their damage, and we'll call it a day. But yeah, the difficulty, and then like every boss, the first one's kind of tough because you're just trying to learn the game, and depending on your build, your damage is probably really bad, and you're trying to figure out how to deal with the guy in the shield and when to attack and all this. And he's got a lot of hit points for a very first boss, so it can be kind of rough for that first boss. But then every other boss, up until the brothers, are a pushover. You know, most of those I was able to either like 2 to 5. I think the most attempts it took me, other than the first boss and the last two, was like 5 or 6 attempts, maybe. And a lot of those were like on second and third attempts. And, you know, first attempt was just trying to figure out what they do. But then all of a sudden, again, difficulty spike. You get to the brothers, and they're like way tougher, air quotes, than the other bosses. And one of the reasons they're tough in the first place is just because they have so much hit points. Like every other boss doesn't seem like they took that much damage. But then now you've got 2 bosses that take a lot of damage you have to put out. And your opportunities to attack are very, very limited. So it becomes a case of like get in, hit once, maybe twice, depending on how fast your weapons are, get out, wait for the right sequence of events to happen so that you can attack once or twice, get out, and do the same thing over and over again. And it just feels really tedious when you're doing that. If you've got a boss, in my opinion, if you've got a boss where they're going to have a lot of hit points, or no, if they're going to, where you've got very few openings to attack, then that boss shouldn't have many hit points. Because the point should be that you're learning the pattern and you're finding that very short window to attack. If you put a very short window to attack and a ton of hit points, it just becomes really tedious to fight them. Because it's like, bait out this attack, jump back or block, counter, block, or duck out depending on what they do. Wait, bait out this. Okay, finally he did the one attack I can bait. So it seems like that was a common pattern with this game. There was a lot of the bosses had like one very simple melee strain they would do, like attack, attack, attack. And if you dodge that, then you can get some hits in. And then they'd have like 2 or 3 special abilities. But there's always like that 1 or 2 hit strings that you could dodge and counter with. But it was very formulaic bosses, it felt like. Oh, wow. Short credits. But yeah, I guess the credits, the ending is pretty cool. I like that what you did affect the ending a little bit. I still don't quite understand what the hell happened with Antanas. I must have missed that part. But yeah, I don't know how he got corrupted. I mean, I know the what's his face, the god, said something about how you can't have good without evil and blah blah blah. But I don't know. I must have missed something in as far as that goes. But really quickly, I want to talk about some of the other things I liked and disliked. Gameplay-wise, yes, it's very much like Dark Souls. It's obviously very heavily inspired by Dark Souls. I don't think any sane person would try to deny that. I don't think it's a cheap rip-off. I don't think any of that. I think it brings enough interesting stuff to the table to be considered its own thing. I sort of like the way they do experience, where if you die and you drop experience, you can leave that experience there and actually get an energy boost. But the problem with that is you lose XP the longer you let it sit there, which is counterproductive to making the decision between grabbing it. So I just stopped doing that. I was like, well, I don't want to lose XP, so I'm just going to grab it. So it was like a no thought process at all. Like, well, I don't want to lose XP, so I grab it. Of course. Like, I mean, I guess you could just get 1 XP, like bank all your XP but 1 and then go die. And then, try to use that for energy regen. But again, now there's back to having absolutely no negative to just leaving the XP there. Maybe make it so instead that it only gives you energy, or how good the buff is depends on how many souls are in that package. So if there's only 1 soul, it's pretty much no bonus. But if there's like 5,000 souls in that soul cluster or your corpse or whatever you want to call it, then it gives you really good regen. But of course, if you die, then you lose all those souls. I think that was a good idea. Don't really like the way it was implemented. I also like the way that you bank your souls. Like, you could bank them, and then as far as I can tell, the longer the more souls you have on you at any time, I think that increases your chances of finding more items. I do know that like the longer you kill without going to a waypoint gives you more, like, increases your bonus multiplier for XP, which I think is another really good idea. But then if you rest at the bonfire or whatever the equivalent, now I'm going to use the Dark Souls term because it is very Dark Souls like, then it resets that bonus. Little things like that I really enjoyed. The combat felt good enough. There's definitely some wonkiness, and we'll talk about the bugs since I want to kind of summarize this a little bit. Game's definitely buggy as hell. There's definitely some serious bugs with this game. Up until recently, a lot of people, including myself, were frequently getting crashes to the point where if it crashed, you try to go into the game again and it would crash immediately. You had to reboot your entire computer for the game to work. And they had workarounds which worked for me, but they finally patched and fixed that. And there's just a ton of other little bugs, mobs despawning or like running away and then despawning and coming back with full health. We've ran into a few enemies where you knock them on the ground, and if you keep attacking them, all of a sudden they're standing back up again, which in a game like this, it's so important that that does not happen, because a lot of what you're doing is based on the animations and animations of the enemy and timing. And when an enemy just goes from the ground and you're taking that opportunity to attack, and all of a sudden he's standing up counterattacking you, it feels really cheap. It feels buggy. It feels cheap. So that kind of thing definitely needs to be fixed. I mean, there's more bugs than you can shake a stick at. Like near the end there, I ran into quite a few. Like, for example, there was that save stone, or whatever you want to call it, that I couldn't use for no apparent reason. A lot of little things like that. And I know, like, even on PS4, people had crashes, maybe Xbox One as well. They definitely need to up their game on the technical level. There was a lot of also reusing of areas, so you end up going back to the same area you've been and kind of re-clearing it, or going a little further than you were before, a little bit different. I didn't mind it too much, but I could see how that could bug folks. And like I said, the end boss, again, I don't like bosses where there's multiple phases and there's like one difficult phase and everything else is just kind of a joke. I don't like that. I don't like having a boss fight revolve around one difficult part. And that definitely felt that way on that boss. I still don't know how his little fire works. I mean, I have no doubt there's a way to avoid it 100% of the time, but I mostly just cheesed it and used fire resist crystals to take the hit and then, finish him off. And because everything else he did was easily dealable. He had the stereotypical triples attack, or the sometimes double attack, the AE slam if you were too close to him, his get back move that every boss had. Most bosses seem to have. He's pretty standard as far as that goes. Then he did the corpse explosion thing, which that was an interesting one. I thought that was interesting. I don't know if it would have helped if you would have killed the mobs instead yourself. Probably not. It seemed like all that matters is they die, but it could not be when he jumps down, he does that one thing where he sucks something out of them, and maybe that's a difference. But I don't know. That was a pretty cool mechanic, so I had to pay attention to the corpses. But the boss himself was 95% easy. The only thing that made him difficult, like if you took the fire part out, like where he just shoots the fire that does a ton of damage, he would have been an absolute joke. But that one little part made him difficult. And again, I personally don't like boss design like that. But overall, I enjoyed the game. Honestly, I was probably going to put this on my Game of the Year list, but the last quarter of the game pretty much kind of soured it for me. The bugs, the ridiculous, like, huge jump in difficulty. Like, if it had been like a more smooth jump, a more smooth gradual increase, it'd have been fine. But you go from just absolutely butchering these Rogar to running into humans, which are doing crazy damage and have like almost twice the hit points of the Rogar. It's a crazy jump, so I was having to readjust at that point, because I would have been totally fine, having to parry and block and all that. But frankly, and this is obviously on me, I'd gotten so lazy from just being able to, I dodged once, attacked, 3 times and the enemy's dead now, that when I ran into those guys, I was like, oh wait, holy shit, like these guys are way tougher, even though it made no sense. But overall, again, definitely worth a try. Don't listen to people who are like, oh, it's just a Dark Souls ripoff. It's a fun game. I really enjoyed it. Graphically, it looks insane. It's a fantastic looking game. The armor and weapons look phenomenal. I could see playing through multiple times to try different things, like, what happens if you side with the god, or what happens if you use the rune, or whatever. Probably nothing major, but just from gameplay perspective, it'd be interesting to play through again, like a New Game Plus. And this game does offer New Game Plus, or playing through as like a different class. But anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Thank you guys for watching this series. Make sure you leave comments in the comment section below. Let me know what you thought of this Let's Play. And make sure to follow me on Twitter as well. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.